3 minutes, and then we'll come back and share a few comments. Go ahead.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Sure, yeah, you could.
I just got here, so I'm probably not ready to both. So.
That's not true. This is back against what we know. We haven't learned very much today, so going off of that. Like the first thing to do is just to say that, like, graduate and like start students, I feel like I'm most accessible to social justice education is when it's relevant to the students, because then they're motivated by what's relevant. So, right. Otherwise, it's just community service. So.
I think that's another way to connect is the connection to community.
Breezy education.
That is true. So you find
Because we're the academics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, like you said, it's more opportunity. Not just
It sounds like the place-based
grounded in the lives of students that you're trying to connect it out.
Because once you have an understanding, a personal understanding, then it's better to otherwise it's difficult to put together. Well, I think also looking at the whole elementary education, I think that it would be beneficial to teach the also what's actually going on in the setting, and you might be able to see through visual view, and I think that would be extremely helpful.
But there's a way in which when you speak the actual problems, like what's next, possibly being good if you start at the local level. To get somebody else elected, you could, you could actually, clean up that park or whatever.
Okay, take a few seconds to finish up.
And I think that both of them are empowering.
Okay, so what are some overlaps or connections you found? Just take a few comments. What'd you say? What are the connections?
Well, especially if you're working in a community school where a lot of the kids are in that community, it's very grounded in their lives if you're learning in the community first and then
Right, yep. So grounded in the lives of our students is definitely, overlap. Great, yep.
We thought that both would be more engaging for the students and empowering for the students.
Yep, and that definitely bears out from my experience. It's almost always something students have other things to say about.
I think it brings social justice education into a more practical or more like grounded. Like we can talk about social justice, it sounds so lofty, but this really brings it down to something real, and it's applicable to expand. You're planting a seed and an idea of what could be done in the bigger picture.
Yeah, and it makes the the activist piece in social justice education. It's kind of just implicit in place-based education, right? So you're acting, you're doing something instead of just studying something, which is important too. But then to act on it is great. So we have I don't know exactly how many school children there are in the U.S. Does anyone know? Is it 10 million, 3 million? Million. We know it's millions, right? I wondered if someone might have that exact number. I forgot to look it up. But if we think about the amount of school children, we know it's millions, right? And they sit in classes for 30 to 40 hours a week. If some part of that would be dedicated to working on projects in the community, to community revitalization projects, think of the change we could make, right? I mean, it's all this energy energy that we have that we don't use. So that's what makes me excited about these two concepts together. So it makes me excited in the first place about place-based education, which is a form of project-based education. So I'm going to give you some examples of things that I've done and things that I've seen nationwide. These are kids from the new school in Kennebunk, Maine. The new school is an experiential, experimental, community-based, project-based high school of about 40 kids. I think it's about 40 kids right now. It's really tiny. We're going to talk about how to apply this model to larger schools, right? That's why I have that model in the end. But this was a small school. I'm going to talk about 3 projects we did here, and then I'm going to talk about, I think, 3 to 4 that have taken place nationwide, and that give us a chance to look at our own community. So, the first project that I did with kids when I was at the new school is a project to protect the graves of former slaves buried in 1800 about a mile from our school. So when we went to the woods, this is what we found. We found a rock. It was, I believe it was limestone, and you didn't really find limestone in that particular area, so we knew something was up. I had read over the summer that through some local history that there were this group of former slaves who had been freed after the Revolutionary War. That's when the North let slaves go. They were granted a piece of land by a white man in town, and they had built houses in that area. And there were about 12. One was named Old Tom, and he was kind of the leader of the community. So I found this information, and I contacted the town archivist, and she brought me out to the site, and I said, really, this is a grave. So we learned that at the time, 1800, if you were upper middle class, or if you were rich, you would have a gravestone brought to you from Boston, carved in Boston, brought to you. But if you're poor, if you're a former slave, if you're a poor white, this is how you were buried, right? However, whites they were buried in graveyards. Right, in cemeteries, and those are protected. These graves are unprotected, so because they're not identified. So we had to do some research. We worked with a college professor. We worked with the fire department because they had this heat sensing radar we thought would work. And the students did research. We read as much local history as we could. We read as much about slavery as we could. We read about the Revolutionary War. We did many site visits because they're just a mile from our school, so we could walk. And we worked with the town archivist. She met with us every other week to get updates on what we were doing and what we should take on and what she should take on. And this had been a project of hers for 13 years, but we provided the impetus for her to continue working on it. And we learned that it had been 200 years. It was 2004 when I did this, and it had been 200 years since these people were buried. So it meant the bodies were gone, right? It was sandy and wet soil. The bodies were gone. But what they can find is they can find the shovel marks, believe it or not. They can actually find the edges of the grave, because the grave had been dug up, and so that middle was softer earth, and the edges were more compact, so they can find those marks. And that's all you need in Maine to protect a grave site. So if you can find that, then the area within 25 feet of that grave is protected. So where I left Maine a couple years later, and when I left, there was a professor and grad students working with the school to use ground penetrating radar to make sure that we identified this grave, but also any others that were in the area, because we knew 12 people who lived there. We only had this marker. So that was a really fascinating project, and it really made me think of what was possible with kids. I was really pushed to do project-based education, place-based education by the principal who worked there, but it was working with the kids and seeing the kids' enthusiasm for projects like this that eventually led me to the next project, which I don't have a great picture of. These are, believe it or not, 2 teachers. They're not dressed like teachers, but they are teachers. They're messing around with trucks or something. But the reason I have it, let me hit it. Let me see this. Actually, I put it in lens. There. Okay. In the background, you can see our solar hot water system, so you can ignore the trucks and whatever's going on. I have no idea. But in the background, there is our solar hot water.